All right, let's dive in, shall we? Today we're really going deep, exploring Walter Isaacson's Steve Jobs, the exclusive biography.
Ah, classic.
It's not just like a surface-level look. Isaacson had incredible access, spent years with Jobs, talked to his family, colleagues, even, get this, rivals.
Wow, that's quite the scope. You're really getting the full picture.
It's amazing, really. A true treasure trove of information. It's
Yeah.
like we're getting to see behind the curtain, the good, the bad, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I mean, Isaacson's known for his in-depth biographies. He really gets into the nitty-gritty.
So for this deep dive, let's try to move past all the hype and really uncover the real Steve Jobs. From his early days all the way to, like, his impact on the world.
Sounds good to me.
You might think you know this story, but trust me, there's so much more to uncover. We're going to explore his genius, obviously, but also, his flaws, his motivations, everything.
That's what makes a biography so compelling, right? It's not just a hero worship thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so to really understand Jobs, we've got to start at the beginning. His childhood, Mountain View, the whole Silicon Valley scene.
Yes, the birthplace of so much tech innovation. What a time and place to grow up.
Right. It's the 60s, Silicon Valley's just exploding, and young Steve is right in the thick of it. Like, think about it. His childhood home was practically down the street from companies like Lockheed and Westinghouse.
No kidding. It's almost like he was destined for a life in tech, right? That kind of environment must have been incredibly stimulating for a curious kid.
Totally. And you can see that early influence, right? Like, Isaacson talks about Jobs' fascination with electronics from a young age.
Yeah, but it's interesting. It wasn't just the tech itself. Jobs was drawn to well-designed objects in general. He had this eye for beauty and functionality.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. Like, his love for Tiffany glass,
Yeah.
Braun appliances, stuff that seems a million miles away from computers.
Exactly. It shows that his design sense, his appreciation for simplicity and elegance, it was already there long before Apple even existed. It's like a core part of who he was.
Now that you mention it, it all makes sense. Okay, but we can't talk about young Steve without mentioning, his mischievous side.
Yeah.
Isaacson mentioned some pretty epic pranks, like tricking his classmates into revealing their bike lock combination, and then, get this, he'd swap their locks.
Oh, man, classic Steve. Talk about a troublemaker.
Right. And it's not just harmless fun, right? It kind of hints at something deeper, like this. Disregard for rules, this ability to bend reality to his will.
Ah, yes, the infamous reality distortion field. It's a key part of the Jobs mythos, isn't it? But it's more than just a catchy phrase. It speaks to this almost supernatural ability he had to convince himself and others that anything was possible.
It's fascinating and a little scary, to be honest, like how much of his success was pure talent versus, sheer force of will.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Isaacson really grapples with that throughout the book. Like, was this reality distortion field ultimately a force for good or bad?
Well, it definitely had its downsides. Right? Like Isaacson talks about how frustrating, even hurtful it could be for the people around him, constantly being pushed to meet these impossible standards.
Right. And it definitely caused friction within Apple, especially as the company grew. But you have to admit, it was also this unwavering belief in his vision that led to some of Apple's most groundbreaking products.
True. It's like a double-edged sword. It fueled both his success and his conflicts. It makes you think about that fine line between genius and, just massive ego.
Totally. And that duality, that tension, it's what makes Jobs such a compelling figure, right?
Yeah.
And it really comes to a head when we start talking about, the birth of Apple.
Yeah, the classic story, right? Two guys, a garage, the whole Silicon Valley dream.
The ultimate origin story.
But Isaacson doesn't just romanticize it, He shows how much hustle, how much business savvy it took to go from tinkering in a garage to becoming a major player in the tech world.
Totally. I mean, you have to remember, back then, personal computers were still a pretty niche thing.
Right. Like, most people couldn't even imagine having one in their home. But Jobs saw the potential, saw the future.
And he knew how to sell that vision, how to convince people that they needed what he was creating.
Like that famous bike shop story, right? He basically walked into this computer store and convinced the owner to buy 50 Apple IIs, just like that.
50 computers! That's a huge order, especially back then. It shows you the power of his persuasion, his ability to make people believe in his ideas.
And the Apple II itself. I mean, that was a game changer. It wasn't just a machine for hobbyists anymore. It brought personal computing to the masses.
It really did. It was user-friendly. It had color graphics, which were unheard of at the time. And it was, of course, beautifully designed.
It was setting the stage for everything Apple would become: design-centric, user-friendly, pushing the boundaries of what technology could do.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how Jobs' design philosophy was really solidified during his visit to Xerox PARC, that research center that was doing all this cutting-edge work on graphical user interfaces.
Ah, yes, the infamous Xerox PARC visit. That's where the seeds in the Macintosh were planted, right?
Exactly. Jobs saw the potential of the graphical user interface, the mouse, the icons, the whole idea of making computers intuitive and, dare I say, fun to use.
And of course, he borrowed some key ideas, let's just say, that would become central to the Mac, which, sparked a whole debate about, like, innovation versus imitation. Yeah. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, we could spend a whole episode on that alone. But the point is, that visit to Xerox PARC was a turning point for Jobs. It gave him a vision for a computer that was unlike anything else out there.
And that vision would consume him for years to come. The Macintosh became his obsession, his masterpiece. And of course, his reality distortion field went into overdrive.
You can just imagine the pressure on the Mac team trying to meet Jobs' impossibly high standards. It was a time of intense creativity, but also, I imagine, a lot of stress.
Yeah, Isaacson doesn't sugarcoat it. He talks about the long hours, the arguments, the sheer intensity of working with Jobs. But in the end, they created something truly revolutionary.
Oh, absolutely. The Mac, with its graphical user interface, the mouse, the whole concept of what you see is what you get, it changed the game completely.
It made computers accessible to everyday people, not just programmers and engineers. And it paved the way for, well, pretty much every computer we use today.
It's amazing to think about how much of modern technology can be traced back to those early days at Apple, to those crazy ideas that Jobs and his team brought to life.
And let's not forget about the marketing genius. I mean, that 1984 Super Bowl commercial, it was iconic. It perfectly captured the spirit of the Mac, this idea of rebellion, of challenging the status quo.
Brilliantly done. It positioned Apple as the underdog, the cool kid fighting against the big, faceless corporations. And people loved it.
Yeah, that image, that think different ethos, it's still a core part of Apple's brand today.
It's pretty amazing how that message has resonated for so long, isn't it?
It is. But, as we'll see in the next part, Jobs' own rebellious streak would soon lead to some major upheaval within Apple.
Oh, yeah. Things are about to get interesting. Yeah, that commercial, it really solidified Apple's image, like the David going up against the Goliath, taking on IBM. It was genius marketing, and it totally tapped into this cultural craving for something different, something that celebrated individuality, creativity.
It's funny how that rebel image has stuck with Apple all these years. But like we were saying, Jobs' own rebellious streak,
Yeah.
well, it caused some serious problems within the company.
Right, exactly. And Isaacson really dives into that whole period, like Jobs' management style, it just became increasingly abrasive and he kept clashing with the board. It all culminated with, well, him getting ousted from Apple in 1985.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, he's the founder, the visionary, and they just kick him out.
It really is this almost Shakespearean drama. The hero, exiled from his own kingdom.
But Isaacson, he makes a really interesting point, like this exile, this forced departure. It actually became a crucial turning point for Jobs. It forced him to confront his own flaws, his weaknesses.
It's like he needed that time away to really grow, both personally and professionally.
And that's when he founded NXT, right? This company focused on these high-end workstations.
Yeah, but NXT, it wasn't exactly a commercial success. It never really took off in the same way that Apple did.
Right, but again, Isaacson highlights how even in failure, Jobs was learning, evolving.
Exactly. The technology developed at NXT, it actually laid the groundwork for a lot of the stuff that would later revitalize Apple.
So his failures, they weren't really failures at all. They were just stepping stones to bigger things.
Exactly. And we can't forget about Pixar, of course.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other chapter in the Jobs saga.
Yeah.
Isaacson spends a good chunk of the book on that period. It's kind of this unexpected side of Jobs, the champion of storytelling, of animation, this whole world of creativity and collaboration.
Yeah, it's really cool to see how he applied his design sense, that obsession with perfection, to a completely different industry. And of course, Pixar would go on to completely revolutionize animation with Toy Story and all those other blockbuster hits.
It's amazing. He goes from being this tech mogul to a driving force behind some of the most beloved animated films ever made.
It's a testament to his versatility, his his ability to see potential in different areas,
So it's like he needed that time away from the cutthroat world of tech
Yeah.
to kind of nurture this different kind of creative energy. And it clearly paid off.
It did, but even as Pixar was taking off, Jobs, he never really let go of Apple. Like, he was watching from the sidelines, as the company struggled without him.
And then boom, the prodigal son returns.
That's right. In 1997, Jobs was brought back to Apple. It's such a dramatic moment. Isaacson really captures the intensity of it all.
It's like this epic comeback story, right? The exiled king returning to reclaim his throne. And he didn't waste any time. He came in, streamlined the product line, brought in Joni Ive to lead design. Basically, he just refocused the entire company on innovation.
Yeah, and this is where we see, peak Steve Jobs, the visionary, the leader, the guy who could see the future and make it happen.
We knew the internet was going to change everything.
Exactly. This wasn't just a fad. It was a fundamental shift in how we live, work, communicate, everything.
And he wanted Apple to be at the forefront of that revolution.
Which led to the iMac, right? This colorful, translucent, all-in-one computer. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before.
It was radical. No floppy drive, built-in internet connectivity. It was like a statement piece.
It was. Jobs understood that technology wasn't just about, specs and features. It was about emotion, aesthetics, creating a connection with people.
The iMac, it embodied that philosophy perfectly. It was beautiful, functional, and it captured people's imaginations.
And then came the iPod. Isaacson really gets into the details of how this all came about, Jobs, he saw this need, this gap in the market for a simple, elegant music player. He wanted to put 1,000 songs in your pocket, and he made it happen.
The iPod, it wasn't just a product. It was this, cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
It changed the music industry completely.
And Jobs' attention to detail, it was evident in every aspect of the iPod, from that iconic click wheel to the super minimalist interface. It was a device that just felt good to use, is both intuitive and luxurious.
Yeah, and he didn't stop there.
Yeah.
He created this whole ecosystem around the iPod, right?
Yeah.
With iTunes, you could manage your music library, buy songs, sync everything seamlessly. It was brilliant.
Jobs always saw the big picture. He wasn't just interested in creating gadgets, he was building a whole world.
And he was just getting started. The iPod, it was just a stepping stone to what would become arguably his most significant legacy, the iPhone.
Isaacson takes us inside the development of the iPhone, all the secrecy, the long hours, the insane drive to create something truly revolutionary.
Yeah, the launch of the iPhone in 2007, it was this cultural moment. Jobs on stage, black turtleneck jeans, unveiling this device that would change everything.
It wasn't just a phone. It was this pocket computer, a music player, a camera, a gateway to this whole universe of apps.
It's hard to overstate the impact of the iPhone, right? It transformed how we communicate, how we consume information, how we interact with the world around us.
It's like Jobs saw the future of computing, and he brought it to life.
And he anticipated this whole shift towards mobile, right? He knew that the future wasn't tied to a desk, it was in our pockets.
Exactly. The iPhone, it wasn't just a product, it was a paradigm shift. And it set the stage for all the Apple innovation that came after, like the iPad.
Yeah, the iPad it came from Jobs' frustration with all these clunky tablet computers, the ones with styluses and all that.
Yeah, he wanted something way more intuitive, something you could just pick up and use.
He saw the potential for this device that was bigger than a phone, but more portable than a laptop. Perfect for browsing the web, reading, watching movies, playing games.
And of course, people were skeptical at first.
Always are, right?
Yeah.
But the iPad, it quickly proved itself. It basically solidified Apple's dominance in the mobile world and ushered in this whole post-PC era.
And with the App Store, Jobs created this platform where developers could create all these amazing apps, which, just expanded the possibilities of these devices even further.
It's incredible to think about, the ripple effects of Jobs' vision. The iPhone, the iPad, they've touched almost every aspect of our lives, from the way we work and play to how we learn and connect with each other. It's pretty amazing.
I know, right? It really makes you step back and just appreciate how far technology has come in such a short amount of time, and how much of that progress we can trace back to Steve Jobs.
He had this uncanny ability to anticipate what people would want, even before they knew it themselves. It's true. He understood that technology was more than just circuits and code. It was about connecting with people, about empowering them, about making their lives better, easier, more enjoyable.
And he wasn't afraid to push boundaries, to challenge the status quo, even if it meant, ruffling some feathers along the way.
Yeah, he was definitely known for being demanding, even
Yeah.
difficult to work with sometimes. Isaacson doesn't shy away from that. There's
Mm.
stories about his ruthlessness, his temper, all that
Well,
stuff.
absolutely. He could be a real handful. But Isaacson also shows this other side of him, a guy who was incredibly passionate about his work, fiercely loyal to the people he worked with, and ultimately driven by this desire to make a real difference in the world.
It's that complexity, that blend of like brilliance and flaws that makes him such a fascinating figure. He wasn't a saint, that's for sure, but he wasn't a villain either. He was just this incredibly driven, incredibly gifted human being who lives a huge mark on the world.
And his legacy, it goes way beyond just the products, right? It's about how he approached innovation, how he challenged the status quo, how he inspired others to think differently.
Isaacson really hammers that home in the last part of the book. He talks about how even when Jobs was battling cancer, he was still pushing Apple forward, obsessing over every little detail of the products that would become his legacy.
It's kind of inspiring, right? Even in the face of his own mortality, his passion, his drive never wavered.
It is inspiring, but it also makes you think about the cost. Like, did he achieve all this success, this legendary status, at the expense of other things, his relationships, his health, his own well-being?
That's a tough question. And Isaacson, he doesn't really give us any easy answers. He just lays out the facts and lets the reader come to their own conclusions.
I think that's what makes this biography so powerful. It's not just a simple hero story. It's a nuanced portrait of a very complex, very human individual.
Absolutely. It's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand not just Steve Jobs, but also like the forces that shape the technology we use every day.
I totally agree. So as you go about your day, interacting with all these amazing devices that Jobs helped bring into the world, take a moment to consider his impact, like what aspects of his legacy resonate with you the most? What lessons can we learn from his triumphs and his failures?
It's a good question to ponder.
It is. Well, this has been quite a deep dive. We've really explored the life and legacy of a true visionary, a man who changed the world. And in the process, I think we've learned a lot about not only Steve Jobs, but about innovation, creativity, and what it means to leave a lasting impact on the world. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.